The sunlit atrium of the upscale Manhattan Design Expo buzzed with conversation and the clink of champagne glasses as Emmanuel Rivera stood near a display of his latest branding work, trying to steady his breathing after another tense call with his mother. When Nathan Brooks walked straight up to him with an easy, confident smile and introduced himself as a consultant looking for fresh graphic design for his startup, Emmanuel felt an instant pull. He could not explain, but he smiled back and shook the offered hand, not realizing the stranger had spent months studying every detail of his life to get close enough to strike at the heart of Elena Rivera, the woman who had destroyed Nathan's family years earlier. They talked for over an hour about color theory and client expectations, Nathan asking thoughtful questions that made Emmanuel laugh more than he had in months, and by the time they exchanged numbers, Emmanuel was already looking forward to their next meeting. Nathan walked away into the bright afternoon light, his mind racing with a plan he had rehearsed 1,000 times since his father's funeral, the plan to befriend Elena's only son, gain his trust, and use that access to expose the shady real estate deals that had bankrupted his own father, leading to the suicide that still haunted every waking moment. Back in his small Brooklyn studio, Emmanuel stared at the new contact in his phone, a warmth spreading through him that felt dangerous, because his mother had made it clear since he was a teenager that any deviation from the straight path she had mapped out would bring shame on the family name she had built through ruthless courtroom victories and cutthroat property acquisitions. He pushed the thought away and focused on the spark he had felt in Nathan's eyes, telling himself it was just professional excitement. The next morning, Nathan texted suggesting coffee at a bright cafe overlooking the Hudson, and Emmanuel agreed without hesitation. Over lattes, they discovered shared tastes in indie films and late-night walks, Nathan listening intently as Emmanuel described the pressure of being the only son expected to carry on the Rivera legacy. Nathan nodded with what looked like genuine sympathy, while inside he cataloged every vulnerability, planning how to twist them later. Emmanuel felt seen for the first time in years, and when they parted with a casual hug, he carried the scent of Nathan's cologne all the way home. That evening at family dinner in the sun-filled penthouse, Elena grilled him about his social life, pushing photos of eligible daughters of her colleagues across the table and reminding him that at 26, it was time to settle down and produce grandchildren or risk being written out of the will. Emmanuel smiled tightly and changed the subject, but the weight of her expectations pressed on his chest like a stone. Across town, Nathan sat in his modest apartment reviewing the notes he had taken, mentally noting how Elena's homophobia could be the perfect weapon if he could push Emmanuel to come out publicly and watch her empire crumble under the scandal. Yet as he replayed their conversation, a small crack formed in his resolve, because the man he had met today seemed kind and talented, not the spoiled heir he had imagined. He shook it off and went to bed, reminding himself of his father's empty chair at the kitchen table. The following week, they met again, this time for a walk in Central Park where the autumn leaves glowed golden in the sunlight. Emmanuel opened up a little more about how his mother had never accepted his quiet artistic side, always steering him toward law or business. Nathan shared a sanitized version of his own family loss, omitting the role Elena had played, and Emmanuel offered condolences that felt sincere. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same coffee cup, and neither pulled away immediately. Nathan felt a jolt he had not anticipated, and for the first time questioned whether his plan could survive getting to know the real Emmanuel. As the sun dipped lower, they sat on a bench talking until the park lights came on, and when Emmanuel suggested they do this again soon, Nathan agreed, his voice steady, but his mind spinning with conflicting emotions. Back home, Emmanuel lay awake, replaying every moment. The connection felt real and terrifying, because if he let anyone in, the secret he had guarded since college would spill out and destroy the fragile peace he maintained with his mother. Nathan, on the other hand, stared at the ceiling, knowing the next steps in his plan involved digging deeper into Elena's files through Emmanuel's trust, yet the memory of that bench conversation made his chest tighten in a way revenge never had before. The days turned into a pattern of texts and quick lunches, each one building a bridge Nathan told himself was only tactical, but the laughter they shared felt increasingly genuine. Emmanuel began to look forward to those moments as an escape from the constant texts from his mother, arranging yet another dinner with a woman he had no interest in. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling client meeting, Emmanuel called Nathan on impulse, and they met at a rooftop bar bathed in late afternoon sun, where the city spread out like a promise. They talked for hours about dreams and regrets, Nathan carefully steering the conversation toward family dynamics, while Emmanuel revealed how his mother had once threatened to cut him off if he did not attend a prestigious law school he hated. Nathan listened, his face a mask of support, while inside he noted the leverage. Yet when Emmanuel looked at him with those honest eyes and said he felt like he could be himself around Nathan, something shifted, and Nathan had to excuse himself to the restroom to regain composure. Walking home that night, Emmanuel felt a hope he had not allowed himself in years while Nathan sat on his couch with a glass of whiskey, wondering how long he could keep the truth hidden before the plan or his growing feelings destroyed everything. The weeks blurred into a comfortable rhythm of shared meals and long conversations that stretched late into the evening. Emmanuel found himself canceling a blind date his mother had arranged so he could meet Nathan at a small gallery opening in Chelsea where the white walls glowed under track lighting. Nathan arrived in a crisp shirt looking every bit the successful consultant, and when he complimented Emmanuel's latest piece, the praise landed differently than any from his mother ever had. They wandered the exhibit side by side, their shoulders occasionally touching, and Emmanuel felt the familiar pull of attraction he had learned to suppress since his college years when he first realized he was gay. Nathan noticed the way Emmanuel's eyes lingered and filed it away as useful information, but the warmth in his own chest felt less like strategy and more like something he had not experienced before. Later, over drinks at a nearby bar, Nathan asked about Emmanuel's childhood and listened as he described growing up in the shadow of his mother's success, the constant expectation to be perfect, straight, and successful. Nathan shared fragments of his own loss. His father, his company crushed in a legal battle. Elena Rivera had one for a major client, leaving the family in ruins, and his father taking his own life 2 years later. Emmanuel reached across the table and squeezed his hand in sympathy, the touch lingering longer than necessary. Nathan pulled back gently, but the contact burned in his memory all night. The next day, Elena summoned Emmanuel to the family office in a bright glass tower overlooking the river. She had arranged yet another meeting with a young woman from her social circle, and when Emmanuel tried to decline, she reminded him of the inheritance clause that tied his future to producing a traditional family. He left the meeting shaken and texted Nathan, who suggested they take a drive up the Hudson to clear his head. On the scenic road with the sun sparkling on the water, they stopped at a lookout point and sat on the hood of the car talking about the weight of parental expectations. Emmanuel admitted he had never felt he could be honest with his mother about anything personal, and Nathan felt the first real crack in his armor, because the pain in Emmanuel's voice mirrored his own buried grief. They drove back in comfortable silence, and when Nathan dropped him off at his apartment building, they hugged goodbye, they embraced tighter than before. That night, Nathan reviewed his research files on Elena's latest deals, the ones that had echoes of the tactics used against his father. He had planned to use Emmanuel's access to the family network to leak documents to a journalist contact, but as he stared at the photos of Emmanuel smiling in the gallery, he hesitated. The following weekend, they attended a charity brunch in a sun-filled ballroom where Elena was a keynote speaker. Nathan had maneuvered an invitation through a mutual contact, and when he spotted Emmanuel across the room, he felt a rush that had nothing to do with revenge. They spent the event stealing moments together in the garden courtyard, where the autumn sun warmed the stone paths. Emmanuel introduced Nathan to his mother as a business acquaintance, and Elena sized him up with sharp eyes but seemed pleased at the professional connection. Later in private, Nathan confessed to Emmanuel that he admired how he navigated the pressure, and Emmanuel opened up about the loneliness of hiding who he truly was. Nathan listened, his hand resting on Emmanuel's shoulder, and for a moment the revenge plot felt distant. Back at home, Emmanuel lay in bed replaying the day, the possibility of being seen fully by someone like Nathan, both thrilling and terrifying. Nathan, on the other hand, spent hours pacing his apartment, weighing the moral cost of continuing the deception against the justice he owed his father's memory. The tension built slowly with each meeting, their bond deepening in ways Nathan had not planned. One evening after a movie in a small theater, they walked through Times Square, the bright lights reflecting off the wet pavement after a brief shower. Emmanuel stopped under a marquee and said he felt happier than he had in years. Nathan smiled, but inside he battled the growing urge to confess everything. The next morning, Elena called, demanding Emmanuel attend a family weekend at their Hamptons house and bring a date, preferably female. He agreed reluctantly and invited Nathan as a friend to help buffer the pressure. Nathan accepted, knowing it was the perfect opportunity to gather more intel, yet the thought of spending an entire weekend with Emmanuel filled him with an unexpected excitement. The drive out was filled with laughter and stories, and when they arrived at the sprawling oceanfront property bathed in golden afternoon light, Elena greeted them warmly enough, but her eyes never left Nathan, as if sensing something beneath the surface. The weekend unfolded with beach walks and dinners where Elena pushed Emmanuel toward the daughter of a business partner. Nathan watched the interactions, his protective instincts rising in ways that complicated his original goal. One night on the deck under the stars, Emmanuel confided that he had never brought anyone home before, and Nathan felt the weight of that trust like a stone in his stomach. As the waves crashed below, Nathan realized the line between revenge and real care had blurred beyond recognition. Back in the city the following week, Emmanuel received a surprise promotion at his design firm thanks in part to Nathan's connections, and he celebrated with a quiet dinner where their knees touched under the table and neither moved away. Nathan returned home that night and deleted the latest draft of his leaked email, the first time he had actively sabotaged his own plan. The internal conflict raged, but every time he saw Emmanuel smile, the revenge felt less important than the man sitting across from him. Their connection continued to grow through small acts of kindness, shared playlists, and late-night texts that made Emmanuel feel less alone in his secret. Nathan began to question everything he had believed about justice and whether destroying Elena was worth the cost of hurting the son who had come to mean more to him than he could admit. The crisp autumn air in Central Park carried the scent of fallen leaves as Emmanuel and Nathan walked the winding paths, their conversation flowing easily from work frustrations to childhood memories. Emmanuel felt a safety with Nathan he had never known, and when they paused by the lake, he took a deep breath and said the words he had practiced in his head for years. "I am gay, and I have been hiding it from everyone, especially my mother." Nathan stopped walking, his face registering surprise, but not the disgust Emmanuel had feared. Instead, Nathan placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "That does not change how I see you." The relief that washed over Emmanuel was overwhelming, and they sat on a bench in the bright sunlight talking for hours about the fear, the isolation, and the constant performance. Nathan listened with genuine empathy, his own hidden feelings stirring in ways he had never allowed before. That evening they shared a quiet meal at Emmanuel's apartment, the city lights twinkling through the windows, and when Nathan left they hugged longer than friends usually do. The next day at the office, Elena called again, pressing for details about the weekend, and Emmanuel deflected, but the weight of his secret now shared with Nathan made the lies feel heavier. Nathan, meanwhile, sat in his apartment staring at the folder of evidence against Elena, the documents that could ruin her if leaked through the right channels. He had planned to use Emmanuel's new trust to access the family server, but every time he opened the file, the memory of that park bench stopped him. Their next meeting was at a museum exhibit where the natural light poured through skylights, illuminating the art. They moved through the galleries side by side, and Emmanuel reached for Nathan's hand in a quiet corner, the touch electric. Nathan did not pull away, and they stood there in the bright gallery, the world fading around them. Later, over coffee, Nathan shared more about his father's death, the pain still raw, and Emmanuel offered comfort without knowing he was the key to Nathan's revenge. The moral dilemma gnawed at Nathan every night, the choice between loyalty to his father's memory and the growing love for the man whose mother had caused the pain. Emmanuel, on the other hand, felt a lightness he had not known, the burden of secrecy lifted slightly by Nathan's acceptance. He began to imagine a future where he could be honest with his mother, but the fear of losing everything kept him silent. One weekend, they drove to the countryside for a hike, the sun warm on their backs, and as they sat on a rock overlooking a valley, Emmanuel admitted he was falling for Nathan. Nathan's heart raced with equal parts joy and guilt, and he kissed Emmanuel softly under the open sky, the moment pure and full of promise. Back in the city, the relationship deepened with stolen moments and whispered conversations, but the shadow of Nathan's secret plan loomed larger. He had already made a small move, sending an anonymous tip to a reporter about one of Elena's deals, hoping to create pressure without full exposure. When the story broke in the business section, Elena raged at dinner, and Emmanuel defended her, unknowingly defending the woman Nathan wanted to destroy. The guilt ate at Nathan, and when he confessed the tip to Emmanuel without revealing his role, they talked late into the night about justice and family. Emmanuel's support only deepened Nathan's conflict. The days passed with increasing closeness, but the tension built as Nathan's contact pressed for more information. He delayed and delayed until one evening at a rooftop party with the city skyline glowing in the sunset, Emmanuel pulled him aside and said, "I think I am ready to tell my mother about us." Nathan froze, the words hitting like a blow, because that revelation would destroy his plan and possibly his chance at revenge. He talked Emmanuel down for the moment, but the seed was planted. That night, Nathan lay awake knowing he had to choose soon between the path of vengeance and the man who would become his world. Emmanuel felt hopeful for the first time, the support from Nathan giving him strength to consider the confrontation with his mother. Their bond continued to strengthen through small decisions like choosing to spend holidays together instead of with family, and the emotional intimacy grew with every shared vulnerability. Nathan began to see that true justice might not lie in destruction, but in the connection they had built, and the thought terrified him because it meant letting go of the anger that had defined him for years. The story of their growing love unfolded against the backdrop of family expectations and societal whispers, but in the bright light of their moments together, the future seemed possible. The pressure from Elena intensified as the holidays approached, and she scheduled multiple family events where Emmanuel was expected to bring a female date. He brought Nathan as a friend, and the weekend at the family estate was filled with tense dinners and pointed questions. Elena watched Nathan with suspicion, but the bright winter sun streaming through the windows made everything seem normal. Nathan played the role perfectly charming and professional, while inside he battled the urge to reveal everything. Emmanuel felt the strain, but Nathan's presence gave him courage, and they stole moments in the garden where the snow glistened under clear skies. Back in the city, Nathan made another small move, leaking a minor document that caused a minor dip in Elena's stock, but when Emmanuel mentioned the company trouble at lunch, Nathan felt sick with guilt. Their relationship reached a new level when they spent a quiet Christmas Eve together, exchanging gifts in Emmanuel's apartment, the tree lights casting a warm glow. Emmanuel opened up about past attempts to come out that had ended in denial from his mother, and Nathan held him through the tears. The next day, Elena called demanding a New Year's brunch, and when Emmanuel arrived with Nathan, she made her disapproval clear. The argument that followed in the bright dining room left Emmanuel shaken, and Nathan stepped in to defend him without revealing too much. The incident pushed Nathan closer to confessing his initial motives, but fear held him back. The weeks turned into months of stolen weekends and deepening love, but the moral weight of the deception grew heavier. Emmanuel decided to prepare for coming out, and Nathan supported him while quietly abandoning more of his plan. One evening in a sunlit cafe, Emmanuel said he wanted Nathan to meet his mother as his partner, and Nathan agreed, knowing the moment of truth was coming. The family dinner was set for the following week, and the anticipation built with every passing day. Nathan spent the time reflecting on the price of his choices, the potential loss of Emmanuel if the truth came out. Emmanuel, on the other hand, felt empowered by the relationship, the first time he had someone who accepted him fully. The day of the dinner arrived with bright spring light flooding the penthouse, and when Emmanuel introduced Nathan as more than a friend, Elena's reaction was explosive. The confrontation left everyone reeling, but Nathan stayed by Emmanuel's side, the decision to support him marking a turning point in his own heart. The aftermath was painful, with Elena threatening to cut ties, but the bond between Emmanuel and Nathan only strengthened in the face of the storm. Nathan finally deleted the last of his revenge files, the change complete, but the past still lingered. Their love had survived the first major test, but larger challenges loomed as the truth of Nathan's approach threatened to surface. The weeks after the family dinner were filled with tense phone calls and Emmanuel's mother alternating between anger and attempts at reconciliation. Nathan stood by him through every call, the support unwavering. They spent long days in the park talking about the future, and when Emmanuel suggested they move in together, Nathan agreed, the decision feeling right despite the secrets. One afternoon in the bright sunlight of a rooftop garden, Emmanuel received a message from an old colleague of his mother that hinted at irregularities in past deals. He showed it to Nathan, who paled, realizing it was one of his early leaks. The conversation that followed was raw, with Emmanuel sensing something was wrong, but Nathan deflected. The trust between them held, but cracks appeared. As summer arrived, they took a trip to the beach, the waves crashing under clear blue skies, and in the sand Nathan almost confessed, but the fear of losing Emmanuel stopped him. Back home, the pressure mounted when Elena announced she was revising her will, and Emmanuel's portion depended on his life choices. Nathan helped him draft a response, the act of support solidifying his change of heart. The moral dilemma had resolved in favor of love, but the past action lingered. One evening at a street festival with lights strung across the avenue, Emmanuel introduced Nathan to friends as his partner, the public acknowledgement of victory. Nathan felt pride mixed with guilt, and when they returned home, he held Emmanuel close, the decision to protect him now absolute. The relationship flourished with shared routines and future plans, but the shadow remained. When a reporter contacted Emmanuel about his mother's past deals, Nathan knew the time had come to come clean. He sat Emmanuel down in their sun-filled living room and began the confession, the words heavy but necessary. The revelation hit hard, and Emmanuel stood up, the betrayal cutting deep. The argument that followed was intense, but in the end, Emmanuel asked for time, the love still there, but the trust broken. Nathan left the apartment that night, the price of his initial choice now clear. The days that followed were filled with reflection for both men, Emmanuel weighing the pain against the genuine change he had seen in Nathan, and Nathan realizing the full cost of his actions. The confrontation forced them to face the reality of their choices, and the path forward remained uncertain, but the bond, though strained, refused to break. The city hummed with summer energy as Emmanuel walked the sunlit streets processing Nathan's confession. The betrayal stung, but the months of genuine support could not be erased. Nathan spent the days in his old apartment, replaying every moment the regret consuming him. He sent messages apologizing and explaining the initial motive rooted in his father's death, but the responses were slow. Elena, sensing the distance from her son, invited him to lunch in a bright cafe where she pressed for details, and when Emmanuel hinted at his relationship, she reacted with cold anger. The family rift deepened, but Emmanuel stood firm, the awakening from the betrayal, giving him strength. Nathan reached out again, and they met in the park where the conversation was honest and painful. Nathan laid out every detail of his plan and how it had crumbled in the face of real feelings. Emmanuel listened, the tears flowing, but the love remained. They agreed to slow down but not end the relationship, the decision a hard one but necessary for healing. The societal prejudice surfaced when friends learned of the relationship, and some distanced themselves but others offered support. The moral questions weighed heavily on both. Was the initial deception forgivable in light of the change? As fall returned, they began rebuilding with small steps, coffee dates, and honest talks. Elena confronted Emmanuel in the family home, the argument loud in the sun-filled rooms, but he held his ground, the price of authenticity clear. Nathan waited outside the building, the support unwavering. The climax of the family confrontation came when Elena threatened to disown him completely, and Emmanuel walked out, the decision final. Nathan met him on the street, the embrace a promise of a new beginning. The betrayal had been faced, the truth told, and the change in Nathan proven through actions, not words. Their love emerged stronger, the sacrifices made on both sides shaping a future built on honesty. The winter months brought new challenges as Emmanuel adjusted to life without his mother's financial support. He took on more freelance work, and Nathan helped with connections, the partnership now equal. The societal backlash continued with whispers at industry events, but they faced it together, the bright lights of the city a backdrop to their resilience. Nathan fully abandoned any remaining ties to his old plan and focused on building a life with Emmanuel. One evening in a cozy restaurant, they discussed the past, the conversation bringing closure. Emmanuel forgave the initial approach, seeing the growth it had sparked in both. The family pressure eased slightly when Elena sent a tentative message, but the relationship remained strained, the cost of coming out real. They spent the holidays together, creating new traditions, the warmth of their bond replacing the lost family gatherings. The inner conflicts resolved through countless decisions to choose each other daily. As spring arrived, they attended a pride event, the sunlight on the parade route symbolizing their journey. The experience strengthened their commitment, and when they returned home, they talked about the future marriage and perhaps a family of their own. The moral dilemmas of the past had been answered through their actions, love prevailing over vengeance. The story of their transformation spread quietly among friends, inspiring some and challenging others. Nathan reflected often on the price paid, the loss of his revenge, but the gain of authentic love. Emmanuel found peace in his identity, the truth setting him free despite the family rift. Their relationship stood as proof that change was possible when faced with the reality of another's pain. The summer sun bathed the city in golden light as Emmanuel and Nathan stood on a Brooklyn bridge, the breeze carrying the sounds of the bustling streets below. They had rebuilt their life together, the betrayal a distant memory transformed into a foundation of honesty. Elena had reached out with a cautious invitation to dinner, the first step toward possible reconciliation, but the decision to accept or not remained theirs. They had paid the price in strained relationships and lost opportunities, but the awakening had brought a freedom neither had known before. Walking hand in hand, they discussed the choices that had led them here, the initial approach, the secrets, the confrontations, and the forgiveness. The societal prejudice still existed, but their bond had grown resilient enough to weather it. As the sun set, they paused at the center of the bridge, the skyline glowing in the distance, and Nathan pulled Emmanuel close, the moment full of the love that had changed everything. The journey had been marked by pain and growth, but they had chosen each other at every turn, the moral complexities resolved through empathy and courage. Their story stood as a testament to the power of truth and the possibility of redemption. Looking out over the water, Emmanuel turned to Nathan and smiled, the future open before them. Can love born from a plan of betrayal truly heal all the wounds it created, or does the original deception mean some trust can never be fully restored?